Hey guys, today, as the title suggests, I'll be discussing Season 3, Episode 13 of Static Shock, and why I think that, in my opinion at least, it's by far the worst one. For those who don't know what Static Shock is, you're missing out. But since I'm so generous and kind and nice, I'll go out of my way to give you the rundown. So, Static Shock was an early 2000s superhero show about a character from Milestone Comics. They were probably called that because they created lots of African-American superheroes, where at the time, there weren't very many. Static being one of them. Brief tangent over, Static Shock is a show about Virgil Hawkins, a young high school student living in the inner city who, after being exposed to a highly experimental gas in an event called the Big Bang, gained electricity-based superpowers, becoming a hero and protecting the city in which he lives. Static Shock was a part of the Paul Dini and Bruce Timm-led DCAU, of which I'm a big fan. But the show itself felt so different and unique than any of the other projects in the universe. Static Shock was pretty out there for a kids show, dealt with a lot of topics that most other kids shows wouldn't, like gun violence, racism, and homelessness. Static Shock was a really great show all around. I only wish there were more like it nowadays. I just finished it very recently and thought the finale was great. Most episodes are. Except for the one that we're getting into today. So originally, Static Shock actually wasn't supposed to be set in the DCAU at all. It wasn't until Season 2 came out that the people in power decided to change that, and as such, Static himself would go on to have multiple crossovers with a variety of DC heroes, including Batman and Robin, the Justice League, Green Lantern, Batman again, future Batman, and the subject of today's video, Superman. Most of these crossovers were really strong, great episodes in my opinion, but the subject of today's video is unfortunately an outlier. But before we talk about that, we're going to have to talk about Superman, and the episode from the Superman animated series that this episode of Static Shock very poorly followed up. That episode being Season 3, Episode 4, titled Obsessed. It's a great episode of the show, and it's just a great episode of television all around. It starts with Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent and photographer Jimmy Olsen at a fashion show hosted by the childhood friend of Clark, Lana Lang, debuting her new swimsuit catalog, of which the main character of today's video is a model for. Her name is Darci Mason, and she catches both Jimmy and Clark's attention as soon as she steps onto the scene. Although it isn't long after that things begin to go very wrong, as a cartoonishly looking ship pulls into the dock nearby. Just then, an astronaut, a sheriff, and a knight all step out from it and march onto the scene, making quick work of the security as they make their way towards the stage and towards Darci. Clark quickly changes into Superman, jumping into action as he makes quick work of two of the goons, revealing them to be completely robotic. He straight up punches the head off of one of them. The third nearly gets away, kidnapping Darci and flying off, but Superman's much stronger and faster than him and manages to send him careening down into the ocean, rescuing Darci, who afterwards gets in her limo and drives off, leaving Clark to convene with Lana about her newfound suspicions of her. It is here when we are finally introduced, or reintroduced, to the villain of this episode, the Toy Man. Also known as Winslow Schott, the son of a kindly toy maker whose factory became a front for a criminal organization, leading him to be offed and leading Toy Man down a path of villainy. He's only made 1 or 2 appearances so far, in which he generally tends to be presumed dead by the end. If only he had actually died. We see here his creepy childlike nature and his obsessive fixation with Darci, and making her completely his. The sheriff shows up, head in his hands, leading Toy Man to assume Superman to be involved. He also gives the Toy Man Darci's jacket, which he huffs, which is gross. Which also puts Darci back into jeopardy, as her room key falls out of one of the pockets. In the next scene, we see Clark show up to the apartment to do some snooping. Using his X-ray vision, he finds no one is inside and just kind of invites himself in. It's not long after looking around, he realizes that the entire room is pretty much empty, aside from a few pictures of Darci on the walls. It is here where he's caught in the act by Darci herself as she gets home, briefly bantering with Clark and just about to call the police on him too, before setting the phone back down, as Clark mentions he's a friend of Lana's. Darci acts kind of cold in this scene, refusing Clark's offer to help her. However, their conversation is cut short by a giant wind-up kangaroo that jumps in from the balcony window. Clark protects Darci, who tries to flee, unfortunately tripping over a cord and bashing her face against the wall in the process. The kangaroo makes quick work of Clark, low-key packing him up before sending him flying out of the window off the balcony. And right as Darci begins to get up, he looks at her reflection in a shard of glass, and she's horrified to see a large crack going across her entire face. Quickly, Clark flies back up and into the scene as Superman, tussling with the giant kangaroo and thwarting its attempts to put Darci into its pouch. In the end, Superman throws the kangaroo off of the balcony before turning around, only to find that Darci was already gone. The camera then pans out to reveal the Toyman watching Superman from afar, stating that he is a rival, planting the seed of the idea that Toyman believes Superman wants Darci for himself. The next scene opens with Lana, working late, and just about to walk out when she spots this open door, choosing to go inside only to find Darci, which is where we get this crazy reveal, and also this grisly shot of Darci as she tries to put her face back on. Caught in the act, Lana begins to question her, where she explains that she's basically a living Barbie doll, produced out of Winslow Schott's toy factory, for the main purpose of being his wife and companion, which is creepy in itself. She goes on to tell Lana about how she had been kept prisoner there, like she was some kind of toy, when all she really ever wanted to do was see the world. And as a response, she vows to kill the Toyman, and take him out of the picture once and for all. I've seen people say that Darci is in the wrong here, and that she's a villain, but she's really not, or she wasn't supposed to be, despite what the later episode will gaslight you into believing. People like to point out how she nearly gets Lana killed in this scene, which she does do, but not really intentionally. Lana tries to stop her from killing Toyman, who I'd argue she has every right to kill. I mean, he's a supervillain, and he's pretty much her abuser. But anyway, Lana tries to do this, and Darci, not knowing her own strength, accidentally shoves Lana back into a row of mannequins, causing a series of events that accidentally sets the room on fire. She does chase after Lana with a screwdriver, but only after Lana tries to call the police. And she isn't doing it out of malice or any hatred for her former employer. She's only doing it because she feels like she has to. In her mind, killing Toyman is her only chance at having a real life, the only way to escape him. She isn't exactly evil, she's only really doing what she believes she has to. I'm sure if Lana hadn't attempted to stop her, she likely wouldn't have tried to fight her at all. I mean, leaving her to die in her own burning office building was kind of heartless, but we had already established that she's kind of cold. She's a very cold individual, and while leaving Lana to die could be considered an act of evil, it doesn't make Darci evil as a whole. After a life of imprisonment and putting up with the Toyman's affections, she's really only doing what she has to do, and nothing more. So Superman shows up and he puts out the fire, saving Lana, who then tells him everything. And after that we get this really cool scene of Darci marching up on the Toyman, ready to take him down, dodging oncoming gunfire from his toy soldier guards, managing to take one of their guns before aiming it right at the Toyman just as he approaches, which is where they have a quick back and forth.
Leave me alone, could you, Winslow?
You were made for me, Darci. You know that.
You may have given me life, Winslow, but I'm not going to settle for this miserable existence.
She isn't evil. She just wants out, to be free. It doesn't even really seem that she wants to kill Toyman for what he did to her, but more so out of necessity, because she can never be free as long as he's alive. Because he views her as nothing more than an object, a machine, one that was made to love him, and that he refuses to let go of. The story, in my eyes, makes it pretty clear that Darci would probably have just kept on living life as a model if Toyman hadn't kept stalking her. I mean, she was pushed past her limit by him, and now killing him is her only way out. Only, she soon finds out that she can't, despite how much she wants to. She's incapable of doing so. Toyman built her with the inability to harm him, and so realizing the futility of her plan, Darci tries to make a break for it, only for the Toyman's sheriff to lasso her back over, taking her as a hostage. Darci laments how she'll never love the Toyman, which is when he takes out a drill, vowing to take her apart and reprogram her until she does. The next scene opens with Superman flying in to confront him, smashing past his guards with minimal effort before landing down in the room the Toyman had placed himself in. Looking down, the Toyman tells Superman that he knows why he's here, and that he must want Darci for himself, which Superman denies, only for Toyman to double down. Superman glances over behind Toyman, where we get a shot of Darci stuck in a box reminiscent of an actual Barbie doll, which is just sad and creepy and weird. Also, the commentary on how Toyman is acting like a spoiled kid who's refusing to share isn't lost on me. A fight ensues between Superman and a little remote-controlled video game guy of Winslow's creation. Fight's kinda cool, but it has nothing to do with Darci, so I won't spend much time talking about it. Superman gets his ass kicked for a while, much to the Toyman's delight, before learning the moves and quickly beating the Toyman at his own game. Although something does happen here that I think is pretty important to take note of. While all the other toys the Toyman has built were all cheering at Superman's seeming defeat, Darci was not, and there was a clear sadness on her face as she watched Superman get knocked to the floor. Why exactly she's frowning, I suppose, is up to interpretation. But to me, it's either because she cares about Superman and doesn't want him to die, or she knows that he can't save her and she'll be a slave to the Toyman forever. I believe personally it's both. I don't want to at all believe the accusations that Darci is and always has been just a cold, uncaring machine, because clearly she's not. It's very likely she frowns here because she cares about Superman. And even if she's not frowning for Superman, it's still clear that she cares at least about herself, which is still something. So Superman fries the robot, much to the Toyman's horror and shock. Quickly, he takes Darci and attempts to flee the scene in his toy helicopter, thinking that this has all been nothing but a small setback. He takes off into the air, which is when Darci suddenly slams her heel into the control panel, breaking right through the front of the helicopter as it careened down into the ocean, blowing up just as Superman had caught up enough to stop them. And yet he finds no trace of them in the water, either of them. The episode ends at a train station. A man passing by, listening to the newscaster explain that both of them were nowhere to be found. The newscaster in the scene calls Toyman Darci's captor, which I appreciate, because that's really what she was. His prisoner. Not his machine, not his creation, and not something that he's entitled to just for having built her. She might have been a machine, but she was still her own person, with her own goals, wants, and aspirations. Thankfully, the episode ends with the reveal of Darci, alive and well, just in a long overcoat and a hat, applying makeup to her recently patched up face before picking up her overly heavy suitcase and boarding the train. Despite the dark subject matter of Darci's story, it ends in my eyes on a more positive note, that after the events of the episode she was able to survive, and finally move on with her life free from the Toyman, the entitled obsessed freak stalking her, going off somewhere else to start anew under the belief that he was dead. Only, unfortunately, he wasn't. Toyman-based episodes ending in his death weren't exactly a new thing. I think both of his appearances in Superman the Animated Series end with his seeming demise. Although this death looked much more promising than the last, considering he never returned, within the confines of the show at least. It'd be a good couple of years before DCAU fans would finally get closure on Darci's story in Season 3, Episode 12 of Static Shock. Now, you're probably wondering, is this episode a good follow-up to Obsessed? A great crossover between one great DC animated show and another, that treats the newly arriving hero with the respect and good writing that he deserves? No. No. No to both those things. Season 3, Episode 12's Toys in the Hood. Now, you think with a name like that, we'd be in for a pretty good episode. I like Eazy-E, and knowing what comes later makes the name pump pretty enjoyable. And this also happens to be the episode where they make an Insane Clown Posse reference, which is fire. But my praises all but stop at those two things. Because I went in wanting to like this episode. I really did, because it has one of my all-time favorite heroes in it. But I didn't, because it's awful. Let's get into the plot and I'll tell you why. So the episode starts off with Richie and Virgil on a bus on some kind of field trip, which is when we see this teacher character we've never really seen anywhere in the show before, and she's clearly none other than Darci Mason. I'll fucking spoil it now. It's fucking her. She looks kind of off in the Static Shock style, as does Superman later, but it is clearly her. Why she decided to stop seeing the world to become a teacher? I don't know. I mean, there's a reason. There's sort of a reason, but it's not a very good reason. We'll get into that later. So, she's talking to Virgil's love interest, Daisy, who's sucking up to her. Richie makes a crack about her being a teacher's pet when all of a sudden a giant cymbal-wielding metal monkey jumps out of the woods and grabs the bus, causing everyone to flee. Darci keeping Daisy close to her, the two running off as Static and Gear suit up to go fight the thing. And it's clear that it's pretty tough, stronger than them both. It whacks Richie right out of the air and into a bush, and has Static grip dance tails when suddenly the intro plays. And then this happens! My goat Superman himself flies in to help Static, who shocks the monkey, and then they work together to take the thing down. Also, Superman has weird irises now for some reason. Afterwards, Static thanks Superman for his help, and Richie relents about how he missed his one chance to get to team up with the Man of Steel. What an L. But I'm sure he'll get another. Superman, using his X-ray vision, tells Richie that he has a sprained ankle in a moment that I really like. And then he flies off, leaving the two to speculate what both he and the giant monkey were doing here to begin with. And so far, so good. I really like this scene, and George Newborn delivers an impeccable performance as the Man of Steel as always. So, they haven't dropped the ball just yet. But let's keep going, and I'll tell you when they do. The next scene opens up with the pair in school, Richie and Crutches, and they're talking about how cool it was getting to meet Superman himself. Virgil briefly talks about how someone like him is out of their league and doesn't have time to hang out in Dakota, saying it's the last they'll see of him. And that's when Daisy and Frida introduce Virgil and Richie to Super Clark Kent, who's writing a report on Superman's fight with the giant monkey, likely a cover so he can try to piece together why it attacked the school bus. After Virgil and Richie botch their interview, Daisy directs Clark towards Mrs. Moore, who saw the whole thing. Of course, talking about none other than Darci Mason herself, who takes one glance at Clark Kent before suspiciously walking off. Which leads to a scene I really like. Clark goes in after her and they talk. They banter a little, almost like old friends, and it's really nice and it's super cool to see. She talks about fixing her face like it's a casual thing, and says she's been having a lot of trouble with her left eye, which is a little odd. I mean, did Clark ever find out that she was a robot and obsessed? I think that was more Superman. And it isn't like she knows his identity, because she asked what Clark Kent's even doing here in the first place. But it's not that big a deal. He's friends with Lana, who knew about the robot thing, and it's not like her assuming Clark wouldn't know wouldn't make sense. So Clark says Superman gave him a tip that Toyman was here, and that he didn't know why, until now. Darci pretty much goes on to say that she changed her name and identity to throw him off her trail, but he's obsessed. Obsessed reference. She says she knew sooner or later he'd find her, which is really just depressing, and when Clark offers to help her get away, much like how he offered to help her before, she turns him down yet again, saying that she's been running ever since Winslow gave her a personality, and now that she has a life, she won't give it up for him or anyone else. Much like last time, their conversations cut short when Superman's super hearing picks up some commotion outside, where he tells her he'll be right back and leaves. And I really like this scene. So far, the episode isn't bad. I believe in this scene at least, both are written very well in accordance to their characters, and it's so fun to see. It's really haunting that despite the ending of Obsessed, Toyman still wouldn't let Darci go, and has been stalking her all this time. It's been multiple years at least. It really is disturbing. So, we cut to Virgil and Richie as a large toy clown comes bouncing in, terrorizing students and ripping a roof right off of a building, attempting to grab Daisy from the class below, before suddenly Static and Superman rush in. Suddenly, the clown opens up like a Russian doll, multiple smaller dolls jumping out, the smallest of which grabbing Daisy and stuffing her inside, beginning to bounce off as another clown grabs Static, keeping him still as the others all march towards him. Which is where he says this.
This clown posse really is insane!
So then Superman saves him like it's nothing because he's the GOAT. Static tells him one of them got away with a student, confusing Superman, who thought they were here for Darci, although he doesn't say as much. He goes back to the class where she was in before, only to find her now gone. Static asks what she has to do with this, and Superman says he'll explain on the way, and the two fly off to the office to get a record of her home address. It's at this point in the episode we finally get to, unfortunately, see the Toyman. He's in his own little hideout and has Daisy tied up to an easy bake oven looking ass machine. He's very creepy in the way he talks to her. I don't really like it. And then Darci comes out, and this is where they drop the ball. Toyman explains that she doesn't want to be a doll anymore, that she wants to be human. She wants to be Daisy. So he presses a button, bringing the machine to life just as Superman and Static land at her apartment. Superman restating Toyman's obsession with Darci. Now they might be able to find Daisy if they can find her. Ugh, all these D names are tripping me up. Anyway, they walk into a room filled with all kinds of robotic parts, limbs, and even heads. Static wonders who made the parts when Superman finds a serial number on one of the arms, hoping that can lead them to finding Toyman and saving Daisy. So, we go back over to Toyman, who says the memory transfer grid is complete. Darci's hooked up to the machine, and Toyman says he can make a perfect nanite duplicate of anyone, and it was up to Darci to choose the person she wanted her new body made after. Toyman's genius would be astounding if he wasn't such a creepy loser incel. But anyways, so Darci says that this is why she's a teacher at the school, so she could find the perfect hosts. And like, okay bro, you were a model before. If you wanted a perfect host, you could have just gotten like another model. Why did you want to be modeled after a child? What makes Daisy so perfect? They don't tell us. She talks as if she's going to take over her entire life. And I definitely think her parents would notice how their daughters just stopped aging, but continuing on. Daisy looks completely horrified as the machine gets to work molding the vessel in the middle of the two into Daisy's shape. If it isn't clear by now, this episode's dropped the ball. The ball's already on the ground, and it's been there for a little bit now. And I think it's obvious to anyone who's heard me go on about this for this long about how stupid all of this is, but if you still don't get it, I'll explain why at the end. So, Superman and Static come busting in. They stare Toyman down, and they have a pretty alright fight scene. Toyman's creations are always so creative, but at this point, I was too angry about the utter character assassination of Darci to really give a shit about the fight scene. Toyman crushes them under a wall and opens the machine, and Darci, now in a replica of Daisy's body, relents how she's finally alive before asking Toyman to get rid of them both, to which Toyman unleashes an army of soldiers made from plastic and kryptonite, weakening Superman and rendering Virgil's powers ineffective at the same time, which I have to say is pretty clever, and I think that's a pretty cool concept. I only wish it was in an episode with a better story. Static gets knocked out of the air, pushing the real Daisy towards the switch, and then I'll just play the clip.
Superman, this is the best day ever.
Sorry to have to ruin it for you.
What? That's not one of my toys.
No, it's mine.
I don't even know where to begin. Who the fuck even was that in the car? I don't even fucking know. It's not explained, and it's not relevant anymore either. Fuck me. Alright, so he's trapped, and Daisy says that she never loved him, and only loved the fact that he can make her a new body, going from being a victim to an actual manipulator. She knows that Daisy's gone and goes after her. God, this episode is so fucking terrible. So, she surprises her, stating that she can't have the original running around anymore if she hopes to perfectly replace her. Why she wants to do this, I don't fucking know. Daisy calls out that she can't be her, to which Darci gives a mini villain monologue about how she spent every day in class studying her every movement. Now, having exactly identical DNA as well, she says that she'll make an even better Daisy than she ever was. Which is crazy. So, Static beats the army guys in an equally clever and smart way, saving Superman, who he leaves to watch after Toyman as he flies after Daisy, who's about to get tossed into a random vat of acid a la the Joker. Why a toy factory has a giant vat of acid? I don't fucking know. God, does this episode suck. Darci throws herself over the edge, pretending to be Daisy. Daisy says she's not Darci, and Static catches them both and sets them both down so they can have the most cliche fucking doppelganger argument in all of fiction. Superman flies in to help, and he's holding Toyman like he's a fucking dog. He uses his X-ray vision only to find out that they're both exactly the same, which is when I knew that Darci isn't making it out of this episode alive. And that realization pissed me off. Static is able to find out which one is real using electrical auras. I'm not going to explain it, but it's fairly clever. Using a slingshot and an explosive ping pong ball to ward them off before making a run for it. I just realized, how did she even get these things? Her body was literally just made out of nanites 5 fucking seconds ago. Whatever, who the fuck cares? So anyway, she makes a fucking run for it. And that right here is where the aforementioned dropped ball manages to fall through the floor and down into the icy cold black depths below. And then, suddenly, Darci falls, and just like that, Toyman, who, for some fucking reason Superman just let go of, walks over, standing above her as she twitches on the floor. He programmed a fail-safe mechanism in case she ever tried to betray him again, which is liquefying her body, and she melts away in real time. She begs him for the antidote, calling him her love before Toyman tosses it away into acid. And Static and Superman do nothing? Do nothing. They do nothing. They do nothing. And then it's straight to a nice, wholesome wrap-up. And Static flies Daisy home while he talks about how cool Superman is. And Daisy flirts with him a little, and then it's over. It's over. Just like that. It's over. It's pretty clear that I hate this episode. By far the worst episode of Static Shock. Maybe even the worst episode of anything in the DCAU in general. Yes, I'd put this one lower than I've Got Batman in My Basement. Never understood how that episode could be so hated, and we all an utter atrocity like this slide. That episode's cardinal sin is being boring. This one is just awful. A good crossover lifts up both characters, compares and contrasts them, or uses them to tell an interesting story that couldn't have been told otherwise. And it's always exciting to get to see one comic book hero team up with another. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel that same excitement before watching this episode for the first time. But that feeling of joy disappeared completely around the halfway mark. Having to rewatch the episode for this video only reinforces my hatred for it. Let me tell you, going from a great episode like Obsession to this is crazy. This fall off needs to be studied. People don't really like I've Got Batman in My Basement, B-Task creators included. But at least I've Got Batman in My Basement didn't ruin a perfectly good episode from a completely different show. I really liked Darci. And it sucked that the writers totally fucked her over. I don't know what they were thinking. This crossover makes every single important character in it much worse. The Darci going back to Toyman is just nonsensical, and I really don't like the message it sends. It was such a cool concept. A living, sentient robot having to get away from her psychotic stalker. In Obsession, it was made so abundantly clear that she hated Toyman. So seeing her work with him here was a slap in the face. The double cross was underdeveloped, and while it kind of made sense, it only continued to warp Darci's character into something she wasn't. In Obsession, she was the victim, and it was clear that despite being a robot, she might as well have been alive. She acted as such, and the story and everyone in it treated her as if her life mattered. Superman put his life on the line just to save and protect her and try to help her get away from the Toyman. But here, she goes from victim to straight-up mustache-twirling villain, a manipulator, someone willing to go kill Daisy, Static, and Superman, of all people, the very same Superman who did everything he could to save her. Sure, you can argue she tried to kill Lana back in Obsession, and that she was always evil, but I disagree. She only did that because Lana wanted to stop her from killing Toyman, who was literally her fucking captor in that story. I'm not saying she was a perfectly innocent character, but she was far from evil. She was more gray, if anything. She just wanted to live her own life and get away from Toyman, willing to risk killing herself and him just to do so. And it's so sad, because she doesn't. She never does. Because for some nonsensical fucking reason, the writers have her go back to him? Why? And it's not even explained why. When? How long has she been living in Dakota? I have a hard time believing she even has the credentials to become a teacher, and she wasn't in any other episodes. So what the heck? It just feels like a choice that came out of nowhere. Does she have, robot Stockholm Syndrome? I mean, obviously she only went back to Toyman to manipulate him into building her a real body, but that's fucking stupid to me. She wanted to be free, to live her own life, and she wouldn't let anyone take that from her. So why would she be willing to take it from Daisy, a completely normal and innocent kid? If she wanted her own life, why would she take Daisy's? And yeah, she was having mechanical issues, and her apartment is filled with robot parts. So maybe the goal was to not be dependent on Toyman? Maybe he was repairing her. But if all you can do is speculate to try and fill the large fucking holes in a story, then it's obviously not a good fucking story. There's a clear difference between writing a story that's meant to be ambiguous and writing a story that's just filled with plot holes. Even with this explanation I just made up in mind, my opinion on the episode and on Darci's assassination as a character doesn't change. There are billions of people in the world. Why Daisy? Why replicate her? Why even become a teacher? That's so random. It all just feels so contrived, like it was only done in order to set up their shitty story. If Toyman's so smart, why can't he just create her a real nanite body? What is so special about Daisy? And the way she's written here is just so... yeah, it's just so generic. She was a morally gray character, not a villain. And it's so dumbfounding that this episode decided to turn her into one. If her life she's so desperate to have still revolves around Winslow, then that episode might as well have not even happened at all, and I'd be a lot less pissed if it did. She goes from being the victim and obsessed to being a manipulator, someone willing to kill the very same guy who helped her initially. Sure, she did that to Lana too, but with reason. And yeah, her reason here is to get rid of the witnesses, but I don't believe that the Darci we saw in Obsessed would be willing to kill Superman and 2 high schoolers in cold blood, just so that she could be alive. Her entire character from the very moment she appears alongside Toyman fell off. She hated him and wanted him dead, and never did she ever before make the claim that she wanted to have a real body. And what's even worse to me is the way that she goes out. She finally achieves her goal. She's finally alive. Anyone who argues that she's a robot and doesn't have her own autonomy and is just Toyman's property, yes, I've heard people actually make that argument. You're wrong. And secondly, she actually is organic biological flesh now. She's not a machine. She is actually alive. Her life should be worth the same as anyone else's, and yet apparently not. She's alive, but only for a few minutes before she then dies, groveling and melting away at the feet of the man she spent her whole life trying to get away from. How fucking sad is that? Fans waited years for a follow-up to her story, and if I was alive at the time, I could tell you that I would have been mad as hell. They brought her back, took away all of her nuance, made her a manipulative, evil child murderer, then killed her. I'm so fucking angry at how dirty this character was done. The story treats her actions worse than that of the Toy Man. He's another character who's ruined for me by this episode, because it makes him look so stupid. If he knew she'd betray him, why would he do all of this for her so willingly? And sure, you can make excuses for that, but you can't excuse the fact that this episode makes Toy Man a pedophile. They literally made him an Epstein-affiliated person. He's up there with Diddy with how much of a creep he is. Daisy is a minor. She's only like 15 or so. And yeah, Toy Man was always a disgusting creep, but I didn't think he was that kind of creep. He's more than willing to spend his life with Darci, and goes along with her plan of putting herself into this child's body. And the comments he makes towards her, even after the switch, are repulsive. And the way he talks to Daisy is creepy too. Yeah, Darci's a robot modeled after an adult woman, but Toy Man's plan is to put her into the body of a teenager and spend his life with her. He's a pedophile, and yet he's treated more favorably by the writers than Darci is, who was only his victim. Also, their plan made no sense. Why would Darci protect Daisy from the monkey at the beginning? Weren't they already working together at this point? Isn't that why she became a teacher? Alternatively, why send the monkey out after Darci if she's working with you? It made no sense either way. It's stupid. This episode ruined Darci and made her a villain. It made the Toy Man a pedophile, and it stains the characters of Static and Superman too. And all for the sake of the worst twist villain in DCAU history. I really liked Superman and Darci's relationship too. Something I love about Superman is how he's an alien, but despite that, he's more human than most of us. And Darci, despite being a robot, might as well be a human too. To Superman, she wasn't just a machine. And you're telling me that the all-compassionate, all-hopeful Man of Steel, the same guy who beat the odds to get an innocent man off of death row, the guy who liberated the war world, the guy who's helped save multiple planets when all hope was lost, and the main example of what it means to be a good person, just let her die? He has super speed, could have stopped Toy Man in an instant, could have done anything to stop him from killing her, and yet you know what he did? He stood there, and I have a hard time fucking believing it. In my mind, Superman wouldn't do that. He's always giving people second chances, he's always capturing, he doesn't kill. She wasn't a robot anymore, she was alive. Even though I consider her kind of alive before. And without Static being there, Superman wouldn't have even been able to tell the two apart. Yet, he let her die. After everything he did to try and save her, I mean, hell, he was only in Dakota to save her. But as soon as it's revealed she's working with Toy Man, this super-powered titan, this embodiment of good, would just let her die. Watch her melt in front of him as Toy Man plucks the antidote into a conveniently placed vat of acid that for some reason exists inside of this random fucking toy factory. Yeah, no. I call fucking bullshit. Superman wouldn't have been stupid enough to drop the Toy Man and let him go monologue to Darci while he straight up kills her. My Superman wouldn't have let him kill her at all. And even if you disagree with me about how this character assassinates Darci for whatever reason, you can't deny that Superman wouldn't have done that. Superman wouldn't have just let her die, especially when everything we've seen of his character points to the contrary. And same with Static. And he isn't portrayed any better either. He knew what Darci was. Superman told him, and yeah, we need to wrap up the episode, so let's just have this reoccurring character die and not bring it up again so we can have a good, happy ending with no strings attached. Like, what the hell were they thinking there? He's a supervillain. Why aren't you restraining him? Why even bring him out of the other room? Why did you bring him with you? I hate this episode. Everyone in it is written so moronically, and it's awful because Superman would never do this. And I dare any of you to argue with me otherwise. Toy Man might have killed Darci, but it was shitty writing that put him in the position to do so to begin with. Superman risked everything to save her before, and would have mollywopped Toy Man before he could even get the chance. He'd be pissed. It was clear that he valued her life. So what am I to believe that he all of a sudden stopped caring because she tried to kill him once? Am I to believe Static would be so angry about his teacher lying and kidnapping his girlfriend that he wouldn't easily catch the antidote out of the air with his powers? No. That isn't like either of them. Superman, first and foremost, is a friend. He is the embodiment of what being a superhero means. He wouldn't just stand there letting two villains murder each other because he put them in the same room. It was his fault even. This episode was so stupid. If the Batman-Batgirl ship is a permanent blemish on DCAU Batman's character, then this episode is definitely one on Superman's, as it makes him, Static, and Toyman all look stupid for the sake of assassinating Darci's character completely. To me, the worst part of this episode is how it takes a cliffhanger that would have been so interesting to see play out any other way and waste it, completely ruining the character of Darci, which they had set up previously. Try as they may, the writers can never make me hate you, Darci. It's tragic, really. She finally escaped from Toyman in her debut episode, only to turn evil for no reason and die at his feet. The Superman who gave his everything to protect her, only watching as she melts down into nothing but a puddle. To me, this isn't the worst episode of Static Shock just because it's atrociously written. It's also the worst because it ruins the episode that came before and makes every single character in it less. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, please subscribe. I want to talk about DC more, and I have a video comparing a different 2 episodes from the Superman animated series in the pipeline. It's probably going to take a long while, but stay safe, and I'll see you later. Secondary outro, I'm just trying out something new. None of this was really part of my original script. I'm just going off here, but if you liked listening to me complain about a 20-year-old episode of television for the past half hour, please subscribe because I might make more eventually. It's my longest video yet, and I apologize for it taking so long. My motivation kind of dropped off. Senior year has been really busy. I am going to make another video like this, comparing 2 episodes of the Superman animated series, although don't know when I'm doing that. Hopefully before the new movie, which I'm really excited for. More excited than I've ever been for any movie ever. I might make a video on that when it comes out, but I guess we'll see. Happy late Black History Month. I'll see you later in whatever thing I make next, possibly something Superman related.